VCT Masters Toronto starts in a few days, so it's time for me to rank the top 10 players that are going to be at this tournament. For my list, I tried to take in as many things into consideration as possible, thinking about recent performances, historical performances at internationals, how's the performance of the team that these players are on overall, how much is that a factor in their individual performance, and I just tried to make a top 10 list that I felt comfortable with, but it was very hard to get there. In terms of ranking players, this is probably one of the hardest tournaments in recent memory to rank. There are a lot of very fantastic players that have been at internationals before, but there are also a lot of new players coming in that had really good performances in their own region, but can that necessarily translate to international play? We will see, but either way, let's jump right in. So this is the board we have today. We will be starting at number 10, and at the number 10 spot, we have Texture. Now, Texture is a player that I did want to put higher. He's a player that just last year was considered the best player in the entire world. However, Gen.G haven't been as strong as their 2024 run. Losing Meteor is an understandable reason for that to be happening, but Gen.G, after having a rough start to the year, ended up having a pretty strong split too, and Texture was a big part of that. By rating, not the best on his team, Foxy9 is actually technically the one with the best rating out of Gen.G. Don't expect to see Foxy9 on this list, but Texture definitely is a player that I think has a little bit more. We've seen it before at the international level, we can definitely see again, so let's see how far Gen.G can take it. Moving on to number 9, we have Rarga, the best performing player out of China that will be attending this tournament. XLG having a very solid run in the Roden region, beating the likes of Edward Gaming, as well as the two other Chinese teams here in Wolves and Billy Gaming, and a lot of that was due to Rarga. Not exactly a player that people see as a hard carry or anything, but a player that does have high impact nonetheless. Being the duelist player for this team, he had the second best rating out of all of China, and I will admit, I didn't watch a lot of China, I don't know a lot about the Chinese players, and I'll just say now he is the only Chinese player on this list, but I felt like even though I don't know much about him, it's hard to not put at least one player from that region on this list. That would have just felt unfair if I left China completely out of this list, so Rarga was my easiest option here, and I think it's deserved. Some people have him higher and his stats are quite impressive, but XLG playing with the sub at this tournament, their first VCT International, at least in the Tier 1 league, so how well are they going to do? A lot of it is going to be determined by Rarga. Moving on to number 8, we have the Flex King himself, Forsaken, another player that could be higher, could be a little bit lower as well, but Forsaken is a big game player. He always turns up at these international tournaments. PaperX missed out on the first international of the year at Bangkok, so they're looking for a bit of revenge here. And PaperX are a very weird team to evaluate for this tournament. They still have mostly the same roster as they've had for the past 2 years. Only change is swapping out Mindfreak for Patman, and that change has seemed to work swimmingly. But Forsaken is still probably the biggest part of that roster and the main pusher of the W Gaming identity. He can play any character that you put on him and he will perform at a high level, and not many players can do that, especially to the level that Forsaken does. So he's a very impressive player. He could be higher, and I wouldn't blame anybody for putting him higher, but for now I'm keeping him at the number 8 spot. I feel like that's fair for where he is right now. Moving on to number 7, we have a player out of Team Heretics, and that is Rians. Team Heretics, a team that I think is definitely being underrated for this tournament. Obviously they had their in-region grand final loss at the end of stage 1, but that's just kind of standard for them. At the end of 2024 they'd been to 2 grand finals internationally, and unfortunately they did lose both of them, but for all those runs, Rians was a huge part of it. Especially at Champions, I thought this guy was the team's most consistent player, one of the best initiator players in the world. This team not playing a lot of Taeho during the last meta, so with Taeho being nerfed, Rians is actually in a pretty good position to do very well on more of those info initiators. I think he's going to do very well at this tournament. I do like Heretics' chances, at least in the Swiss stage. Mini-Boo could also be on this list. I left him just on the outside of the top 10, but I decided to keep it at 10, and I do think that Rians is Team Heretics' best player. He's shown up at international tournaments before, so I do not doubt that he is going to have a good tournament in Canada. Moving on to number 6, we have another player that at one point was considered the best in the world. That is Zekin. So Zekin is a bit of an interesting case. He did end up having a pretty strong stage 1, especially by the end of it. One narrative that I was talking about with Zekin is that I feel like he is missing TenZ, whereas TenZ was able to set him up in a very strong way in 2024, helping them to that Madrid title and a top 4 appearance at Champions. And Zekin was a huge part of those runs, but he's definitely needed to adjust without having TenZ on the team. And I think lately he's done a much better job at doing that than he was early in the season. Not that he's really had much of a down point this season, it's just we've seen the heights that he can reach, especially in that kickoff 2024 to Madrid run. He was absolutely unstoppable, clearly the best player at that Madrid tournament, but I do think he's got more to give. He could very easily be in the top 5 as well. I left him just outside of it. He's been doing a very good job at playing Yoru especially. Really liked what I've seen from him on that agent, and we know that he can play Neon, we know that he can play Jet. He is a versatile duelist player. Who knows, maybe we get to see him on an ISO or a Phoenix at one point. Not really expecting that, but with the meta pretty up in the air, we will see how that ends up shaking out. But I think Zekin is probably going to outperform what I put him as now. I just feel like, again, there are just so many good players at this tournament. I felt like 6 was a comfortable spot for him. Moving on to number 5, we have our first player from G2 showing up, and that is Leaf. I've seen Leaf higher on some lists. He was higher on the Plat Chat list, and I definitely think that he is an incredibly solid player. Being above of the players that I have in the bottom 5 of this top 5, that definitely speaks volumes to how good I think Leaf is. And he's a player that's been in very good form for G2 all 2025. I do think there are times where Leaf can have some down points, specifically in that grand finals at Bangkok versus T1. If he was performing a little bit better during that match, maybe they end up winning that. But I do think that the players on G2 are taking that loss as a learning experience and have used that to improve themselves. Yes, they had some rough matches during the playoffs of stage 1, but they still ended up winning the whole bracket, and Leaf was a huge part of that. Being that strong Sentinel player, he's been great on Vise this year. Really liked what I've seen from him on that role. He was playing a lot of Viper as well. We'll see if he ends up playing a bit more diverse Sentinel role, but I think overall we're probably going to keep seeing him on that Vise and on that Viper quite a bit, and there's not really a huge reason to take him off of that role because he has been one of the best, if not the best Sentinel in the world in 2025 so far. So I think he's a very good player. He does have some struggles in big games, so that did kind of knock him down for me, but I still think that Leaf is very deserving of a top 5 spot, so that's where I put him. Moving on to number 4, we have a player that a lot of people have in their top 3, and that is Kayak. Now, Kayak is a pretty interesting player to me. There were times during this year where Kayak could have performed better. He started stage 1 a little bit rough his kickoff, while his overall stats were pretty good. It's not like he was lighting the world on fire, but by the end of stage 1, we've seen that improvement from Kayak come game after game, and he ended up being the top performing player in all of EMEA. EMEA is a really good region, so it's hard to argue him not on the top 5 of this list, and a lot of that can be attributed to the leadership at Fnatic, but I think that just speaks volumes about Fnatic scouting. They were able to pick up Kayak in the offseason after letting Durka go, a very bold move on behalf of management, but at least right now it ends up looking like a pretty smart move. Kayak is very versatile on the duelist role, and I think that's something that does get kind of underrated when we talk about duelist players. Look, for example, at 100 Thieves, where they have Asuna who can play Raze but can't really play Jet, and then you have Cryocells who can play Jet but can't really play Raze or Neon. So you end up having pretty wacky comps because of that, but Kayak has been very consistent on multiple different agents. He's played a lot of Yoru this stage, has looked phenomenal on that agent, as well as performing incredibly well on Raze, Neon, and a little bit of Sage there. So all that to me points to Kayak being deserving of a top 5 spot. I just feel like since this is his first tier 1 international, I didn't feel super comfortable putting him in the top 3 yet, especially being a rookie. He can absolutely prove me wrong and go on a deep run. I did pick Fnatic to win this tournament, and if they're going to do that, it's going to be because Kayak helps take them there. Moving on to number 3, we have a player who I think is definitely getting underrated because of the recent patch, and that's Trent. So if the Tail nerfs didn't come in, we probably would have seen a lot more people put Trent at probably 1 or 2. However, because of the Taeho nerfs and because Trent has been exclusively playing Taeho for the entire year so far, that has affected people's ranking of him. But I do think that Trent is a very phenomenal player. I don't think he's carried by the agent he plays. I think he plays that agent to a very effective level, and with Taeho being nerfed, we'll see him return to some agents that he used to play on. We'll probably see him play more Fade and Sova. We'll see if maybe he goes back to the Gecko. And while this specific meta has been his highest performing meta, I think that's not the main reason why he's been so good this year. I think this is Trent reaching the peak that he has been working towards for quite some time. So I did bump him down to where I would have put him if it wasn't for the Taeho nerfs. I did do the same thing that a lot of people did, but I only bumped him down to number 3. He probably would have been at number 1, and I think he might prove everybody wrong here. I think G2 is going to be a very dangerous team at this tournament, and Trent is going to be a big reason why. This is a long time coming for Trent. I don't think he's just carried by the agent he plays, and I think he's going to prove that to people. Moving on to number 2, we have the best performing player out of Pacific. we have Jemkin. So Jemkin being a pretty hard carry for RRQ to be able to get them to the grand final of their in-region tournament, and they ended up winning that one, Jemkin being a very big part of it. Having an incredible match in that Pacific Grand Final, he got 89 kills, he was plus 25, and I was talking about versatility with duelist players earlier, he played 3 duelists during that match as well, playing ISO, Yoru, and Jet in that grand final. So he can play multiple agents, he's been very good for RRQ for a while, and he's kind of hitting his peak now. And hey, maybe it's not even his peak, maybe he has a lot more to give, and I definitely think he's going to give it. Do I think RRQ has the greatest chance at this tournament? Not necessarily. I do look at those 4 playoff teams and I think who is the most likely to get upset, and it might be RQ, but if it doesn't happen, then Jemkin, I think, is going to be that main reason why. He's been really good for a while, he's attending his first international, I don't think he's going to want to waste the opportunity, and being the best performing player in your region in the Pacific, which is quite a competitive region, that's incredibly impressive. So that to me says that he can't really be anywhere that isn't in the top 3, we'll see if it ends up being the truth. Moving on to the number 1 spot, the best player that I think is attending VCT Masters Toronto, we have Ospos. Ospos, I think, is the best player to ever play Valorant. He's incredibly consistent, he's very high performing, his downbeats are usually a lot better than most people's peaks. He's very, very good at what he does. He was playing a lot of Jet this year, we haven't really seen him on Yoru, and I do think that Yoru is probably the best duelist in the game right now, so that is one concern. But even in a time where Jet isn't considered the top duelist anymore, he's still putting up insane numbers with her, as well as doing great on Neon. Maybe we see him on Yoru at this tournament, I could see that happening. And I think that the Tejo meta was one that did kind of hinder his ability a little bit. Having all those missiles going everywhere in spots that he likes to get into, I think that was kind of hindering him a little bit. So I do think that with the current meta, with what this tournament is going to have, I think it's in a very good position for Ospos. Does MIBR end up making it out of Swiss stage? We will see, but I think that that is a dangerous team with some really good players on it. Probably could have put another player on this top 10 list, but again, so many good players. I do believe that Ospos is going to continue to be the best player in the world. However, one thing I will mention with him is that when Ospos makes the second international of the year, sometimes it doesn't really go well. This dates back to his time on Loud, where in 2022 at Copenhagen, Loud went out early. They ran into Optic in the group stage, which is just unfair, so that happened. Then we had 2023 with Loud at Tokyo. Then we had 2024 with Leviathan at Shanghai. So is that mid-season nerf that people usually put onto Loud as a team, is that actually just Ospos's? However, I don't think any of the times that those teams were knocked out were necessarily on him, but it is a common trend with teams that he's on. But maybe MIBR is able to break that curse. A lot of it is going to depend on the rest of the roster. I don't think Ospos is going to underperform here. So that is my top 10 players at VCT Masters Toronto. Let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think of this list? Who do you think deserves to be here that I didn't mention? Obviously wanted to put players like Jogmo, players like Miniboo. It was really hard to come up with this, had to kick a couple players that I wanted in out, but this is the list that I've come up with so far. So let me know yours in the comments down below. Let me know where I'm wrong, and please click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye. Where all the trailers and everything that we saw heading into the release of the movie looks pretty bad, but then the movie actually ends up being pretty good. But unfortunately for my sanity, that was not the case.
Lava, chicken. Steve's lava chicken, yeah, it's tasty as hell. Ooh, mama, see tonight you're ringing.